Konstantin Stanislavski, a director, said, "There are no small parts, only small actors." That may be true when it comes to acting, but I know it's true when it comes to ministry. But we're going to take a look today at those who thought they had parts that were way too small and wanted to have a larger part. But in order to do so, they had to replace somebody. We're going to also take a look at God's response to their actions. Where we get today's message is a time of scariness, a time of challenge, a time for aspiration, all of those things wrapped up in an event in the scriptures that I'll try to share with you in hope to encourage you in your walk with the Lord. So if you have your Bibles, and you should, turn to Numbers chapter 16, and we're going to start with the first verse. And it says this, "And now Korah, the son of Izhar, the son of Kohath, the son of Levi, with Dathan and Abiram, the son of Eliab, and On, the son of Peleth, son of Reuben, took action." Now I want you to notice something here. There's several people who are involved in this situation. One is a Levite, which means he's a part of the priesthood. He's also probably a cousin of Moses, so he's a family member. And we also have one who's the son of Reuben, who has nothing to do with the priesthood, and yet he has joined forces with these people. "And they rose up before Moses, together with some of the sons of Israel, 250 leaders of the congregation, chosen in the assembly, men of renown." So we have, if you will, a sizable rebellion and people who aren't just followers. These are people who are not only leaders, but they're well respected. They're men of renown. And so this is, if you will, a very critical time in what's happening with the people of God, because we have this rebellion happening. "And they assembled together against Moses and Aaron, and said to them, 'You have gone far enough, and for all the congregation are holy, every one of them, and the Lord is in their midst. So why do you exalt yourself above the assembly of the Lord?'" Now I find this a little odd, because they consider the entire congregation holy. Well, they are holy in the sense that God set them apart. But if you take a look at their actions, it's far from holy, because every time God says do something, they don't do it. Take the promised land. Oh, no, we're not. We can't. Don't take this promised land. Oh, let's try. They're always backbiting and complaining, and they're always bringing charges against Moses. And again, it goes, just a few chapters ago, we saw that Moses was the most humble man, and yet they're accusing him of lording it over them. So they're making accusations, and oftentimes leaders, whether you're in ministry or whatever, you will often find false accusations that people make against you. And so that's what's happening here. They're saying, "Why is it that you're lording it over us?" When in essence, all that's happening is that Moses says, "Thus saith the Lord." So it's the Lord lording it over them. Moses simply is the conduit in which the people understand what God is saying and doing. And when Moses heard this, he fell on his face. Again, I think he's somewhat kind of crushed, but and in essence showing his sorrow that the people have come and brought these charges and rebellion against him. And he spoke to Korah and all his company, saying, Tomorrow morning the Lord will show who is his, and who is holy, and will bring near to himself, even the one whom he will choose. He will bring near to himself. So in essence, Moses says, okay, you want a rebellion? You're saying that you're holy, that you can lead these people. Okay, we're going to have a spiritual test. And we're going to let God decide who he chooses. Who is it that God is authorizing for him to draw near and to speak his words? So Moses doesn't say, I'm going to have eloquence of speech and tell you why you should listen to me. He's going, let God make the choice. And so he sets out this test. It's kind of like many centuries later when there's a test with the gods of Baal versus God, and they let the gods of Baal go first, and they do nothing, and God is the one who acts. And so Moses is saying, okay, we'll let God decide. So he says, this is going to be the test. Do this. Take censors for yourselves, Korah and your company. Now, a censer is basically a metal device that you have with a chain, and you place coal, and then you put incense on it, and that's used to go back and forth from the altar to the altar of incense, and it's also used to fill the very places. It ultimately kind of represents the prayers of the saints. And so it's a holy item. And he says, so I want you, because you are Levites, and so you're in charge of these types of things. So, okay, you take your holy instrument and you get them prepared, you and everybody associated with you. And he goes, and put fire in them and lay incense on them in the presence of the Lord tomorrow. And the men whom the Lord chooses shall be the one who is holy. You have gone far enough, you sons of Levi. So he's saying, I want you to take your incense and have this, and God is going to choose between us. But I've had it with you. You keep pushing against God and God's representative, and so this is it. I've had, which is interesting because Moses is always interceding for the people. If it weren't for Moses, none of these people would be alive. Because God has several times said, I'm going to wipe you out. And Moses, no, don't do that. You know, other people will say you can't do things. He's always interceding for them, and yet they're accusing Moses, and he's going, you wouldn't be here if it wasn't for me. And so he goes, you've gone far enough. I've had it. And he goes, you sons of Levi, the ones who are supposed to be ministering to God and to God's people. He goes, you've just gone too far. Then Moses said to Korah, hear now, you sons of Levi. Is it not enough for you that God of Israel hasn't separated you from the rest of the congregation of Israel to bring you near to himself, to do the service of the tabernacle of the Lord, and to stand before the congregation to minister to them? He's going, God called you to do something. Is that so little to you that God has called you to be a minister to him and to his people? And you think of that as nothing. And so now what you want to do is you want to say that you're better than Moses, that you should replace Moses, and that you should have a bigger role in what happens to the matter. There is a director named Konstantin Stanislavski. He said this: there is no part too small, only small actors. He said, it's not the size of your part, it's what you do with the part you have. And he also said this, and I think this applies to whatever you do, but especially in ministry. All roles are important, and should be performed with equal commitment regardless of the size. If that is true when it comes to acting, which happens and you record it and whatever, and you make a movie or you have a play, and the play is over or the movie is over, how much more is that important for us as ministers and people of faith in the ministry? It doesn't matter the size that God has given me to do my ministry. Maybe a small Sunday school class. It may be you go out and you do good in the community. It may be that you attend or serve in a small church or a big church that no one notices. It's not the size of your ministry. The fact is, God has called you to that ministry. You should then say, it doesn't matter the size of the ministry. I am going to commit myself to that ministry, regardless of the size, because it's worth it. Because what God has called us to do, it doesn't last for a few moments or even hundreds of years in black and white film. What God has called us to do is for eternity. And yet we're so worried about, well, does anybody recognize me? Does anybody care? How come it's not bigger? How come whatever? God called you, and commit to that service. Many, many decades ago, when I was 7 years old, I wanted to be a lawyer. I never thought about doing anything else other than being a lawyer. I got accepted to a couple of law schools, and while I was awaiting, and I made a choice, and while I was awaiting to go, suddenly I felt a call to the ministry. Now, at the time of the call to the ministry, the pastor we had was more of an evangelist. And I got saved already, so kind of what he had to say didn't really apply to me because I already believed in Jesus. So I would either read the passage he was doing, or I would read something else and do things. But when I got called to ministry, I fought it because I go, God, I know you. You'll send me to some place with a bunch of rednecks and I won't fit in and whatever, because that's who you are and that's what you'll do. And I don't want to do that and argue with him. Now notice, even though I wasn't thrilled with the way the pastorate was happening, I didn't think I would replace the current pastor. God would send me somewhere else. And after struggling for several weeks with that, I said, well, if I say I'm a believer, if I say I follow you, I think it's a really stupid idea for me to be a pastor, but if that's what you want, I'll do it. And then I had a sense of God saying, go ahead and go to law school. We'll talk later. And a few years later, when we had a whole different pastor, suddenly I felt the call to the ministry again. Again, I didn't feel called to replace him as the pastor. I thought what God would do would call me to be like an interim pastor else places, or to supply preach. It wasn't to replace the guy who was here, but was to do what God had called me to do maybe elsewhere. And then I became ordained and all those types of things. And then suddenly on one Wednesday night, unbeknownst to me, I then became your pastor. Pray for yourselves. Okay. But again, it wasn't to replace him. He decided to go, which I'm really grateful for in the sense of this. I didn't challenge who God was having in place. I let God deal with what was happening. All too often, we're very eager, and when things don't go right in the church, we want to replace the guy. Now, I hope that sometime there will be a successor to me. And I'm assuming that will happen unless Jesus comes beforehand, and then who cares? But I hope there's a successor after me. But I also hope that you don't replace me. But you're a congregation, you could do like these people do or not. I mean, whatever. But again, at least I won't have to look at the new guy and say, well, I got here because I replaced the former guy, and so now you're just replacing me. You're just doing what I did. And so we need to take care how we approach people in ministry. We may not agree with how they do it, but maybe how they do it is how God has called them to do that thing. And God has called us to do something very different. And maybe the timing isn't perfect for us, but it may be God's perfect timing. And so they're unhappy with the fact that they don't think the size of their ministry is as important. They want to be like Moses. Rather than doing what God had called them to do and do it with every fiber of their being. And that he, being Moses, and that he has brought you near, Korah, and all your brothers, sons of Levi, with you, and you are seeking for the priesthood also. He goes, it's not good enough that you are priest and that you minister. You want to be, in essence, the high priest. You want to replace Aaron. So you're not only attacking Moses, you're attacking Aaron, because you want to be Aaron rather than Aaron. Therefore, you and all your company are gathered together against the Lord. Notice Moses understands it's not that they're rebelling against him and Aaron. They're rebelling against God. But as for Aaron, who is he that you grumble against him? Because what has Aaron done against you, other than to intercede for you and to be a high priest? You may not like my leadership style, but Aaron has been a priest, not me. So why are you attacking Aaron, not just me? Because they're attacking God and not just Moses and Aaron. Then Moses sent a summons to Dathan and Abiram, the son of Eliab, but they said, we will not come up. Basically, they go, we don't care who you are. We don't care that you're asking us to come. We're not going. Is it not enough that you have brought us up out of a land flowing with milk and honey to have us die in the wilderness, but you would also lord it over us? Now, I find this interesting. Their again attack to Moses is, we were slaves in Egypt. You took us to the land of milk and honey, but we're ultimately going to die in the wilderness. Well, guess what? That wasn't Moses' plan. Nor was it God's plan. The reason they're not in the promised land is because they didn't have faith in God to take the promised land. The reason they're going to die in the wilderness is because God said, I've had it with you, and because Moses interceded, I'm going to let you die in the wilderness, and because you were supposedly afraid about your kids, I'm going to let them go into the promised land, but they got to wait until you drop dead. It's not Moses' doing. Moses' doing was, you're still alive now. Indeed, you have not brought us into a land flowing with milk and honey, nor have you given us an inheritance of fields and vineyards. Would you put out the eyes of these men? We will not come. Again, they're saying, you didn't deliver us. Moses never was the one who was going to deliver them. He wasn't the deliverer. Moses tried that 40 years earlier, when he tried to free the children of God from the Egyptians, and it didn't work out so well, so he then ended up spending 40 years in Midian. Then God said, now's the time, and he sent Moses to perform God's signs and wonders, not Moses' signs and wonders. And God was the one who separated the seas, and God was the one who provided a fire at night and a pillar of cloud by day. God was the one who fed the manna. God was the one who provided the meat. God was the one who provided water. God was the one who brought them to the land and said, I'm going to give it to you. And they're saying, no, Moses failed. Then Moses became very angry and said to the Lord, do not regard their offerings. I have not taken a single donkey from them, nor have I done harm to any of them. Moses goes, I haven't gotten rich off these people. Nothing that I have done has caused them any harm. Quite frankly, if you read up to this point, everything he's done has been to protect them from themselves. So Moses had enough and said, God, don't listen to him. And Moses said to Korah, you and all your company be present before the Lord tomorrow, both you and they along with Aaron. Each of you take his fire pan and put incense on it, and each of you bring his censer before the Lord, 250 fire pans. Also you and Aaron shall each bring his fire pan. So again, Moses is reiterating the test. You guys, there's going to be 250 plus the Korah and everybody else on their side, and Aaron on one. Is it the majority that God chooses, or the one God chose originally? Kind of like the 10 who gave the bad report versus the minority who said, no, we can do it. So does God listen to the majority or not? So they took each his own censer and put fire on it and laid incense on it. And they stood at the doorway of the tent of the meeting with Moses and Aaron. These are great movie moments. When you've got, they're in front of the tabernacle, and you got one mass of people on one side with censers and smoke and all that, and you got Aaron and Moses. Thus Korah assembled all the congregation against them at the doorway of the tent of the meeting. Korah said, it's not enough for me to have me and my people and the 250. I'm going to have the entire congregation on my side also. I'm going to have an open rebellion with the entire congregation. And the glory of the Lord appeared to all the congregation. Again, this is a great movie. All of a sudden, God in this cloud probably comes down to make his choice known. It's not nothing in the air. All of a sudden, God himself is present. The glory of the Lord is there so that everyone can see. It isn't Moses who makes the choice for God. It isn't God who tells Moses who to choose. God himself is going to confirm his choice. Then the Lord spoke to Moses and Aaron, saying, separate yourselves from among this congregation, that I may consume them instantly. You see, God has had it over and over and over. Let's take them out. Moses says no. Let's take them out. Moses said no. And then finally God goes, you and Aaron, back up. Before I was just going to keep you. Now I'll keep you and Aaron. Everybody else, you back up from them, and I'm going to just wipe them out. But they fell on their faces and said, O God, God of the spirits of all flesh, when one man sins, will you be angry with the entire congregation? Well, the entire congregation has been sinning, but they do have leaders. So they're saying, okay, the leaders are one thing. The congregation, they're subject to being lied to and accepting it. Then the Lord spoke to Moses, saying, speak to the congregation, saying, get back from around the dwellings of Korah, Dathan, and Abiram. So he goes, okay, you don't want me to wipe them out. Then those people who listen to your warning, who get away from them, will be okay. But if they don't get away from them, they're not going to be okay. Then Moses arose and went to Dathan and Abiram, with the elders of Israel following him. And he spoke to the congregation, saying, Depart now from the tents of these wicked men, and touch nothing that belongs to them, or you will be swept away in their sin. So they're saying, make a choice. Follow them and suffer their fate, or separate yourselves and truly show that you are holy, that you separate from the sinful. So finally they got smart. So they backed up from around the dwellings of Korah, Dathan, and Abiram. And Dathan and Abiram came out and stood at the doorway of their tents, along with their wives and their sons and their little ones. So their family stayed with them. May not have been a good choice. And Moses said, By this you shall know that the Lord has sent me to do all these deeds. For this is not my doing. Moses understands. He is simply the mouthpiece of God. Thus saith the Lord, and I tell you, thus saith the Lord. Moses didn't do any of the things, or didn't fail to do any of the things that they're accusing him. It's God who does it, and Moses acknowledges it's not me doing it. It's God. For this is not my doing. If these men die the death of all men, or if they suffer the fate of all men, then the Lord has not sent me. So in essence he goes, if they die of old age, or they die of some they get hit by something, or they just die typically how all people die, then God isn't with me. God didn't choose me. I failed the test. But if the Lord brings about an entirely new thing, and the ground opens its mouth and swallows them up with all that is theirs, and they descend alive into Sheol, then you will understand that these men have spurned the Lord. Now, we live in Southern California. We tend to be a little more okay with earthquakes, as we've lived with them. But people from other parts of the country, they're like, well, how can you live in an earthquake area? And my attitude is, when you live someplace like where it has tornadoes, then maybe you should be at this place or that place, because the path of the tornado. You don't know where the ground is going to shake, so this place is just as good as that place. But in all my years of living in Southern California, there may have been a few cracks, but the world hasn't opened up. That's highly unusual. Now, I know there were a few people that are saying you could buy oceanfront property in Arizona if you just wait long enough, but I still live in Southern California, so I guess I'm not that smart. And so he said, so he goes, this is what's going to happen. An entirely new thing is going to happen. So earth is going to open up. They're going to fall in alive and die. And as he finished speaking all these words, the ground that was under them split open. Again, this is a great movie. Poof. And the earth opened its mouth and swallowed them up, and their households, and all the men who belonged to Korah with their possessions. Gone. So they and all that belonged to them went down alive to Sheol, and the earth closed over them, and they perished from the midst of the assembly. Now again, even in those times with such a severe earthquake that we have, that the earth splits a little bit, it doesn't then heal itself and go back together. God has done something really new. He split the earth just where these people are, and he shut it back. Maybe you should pay attention to what God is doing. Okay, the separating of the Red Sea, not enough. The pillar of cloud by day and the pillar of fire by night. The feeding of the manna. All of these things. Maybe now you pay attention to who God is. And all Israel who were around them fled at their outcry, for they said, the earth may swallow us up. They had the fear of God put into them. And good. Fire also came forth from the Lord and consumed the 250 men who were offering the incense. So God not only took care of the ringleaders, He took care of the leaders, the men of renown, who participated in the rebellion. Because God is not mocked. God's choice is irrevocable. God chose who He chose. And you don't mess around with God's choice. Then the Lord spoke to Moses, saying, say to Eleazar, the son of Aaron, the priest, that he shall take up the censors out of the midst of the blaze, for they are holy, and you scatter the burning coals abroad. So God says, those censors that those 250 were holding, those are holy items. Pick them up. Now I want you to take the coals and the incense and all that were in them, just throw them away. Get rid of them. But I want you to keep the holy instruments. And God is going to give, if you will, a new holy purpose. As for the censors of these men who have sinned at the cost of their lives, let them be made into hammered sheets for a plating of the altar, since they did present them before the Lord, and they are holy, and they shall be for a sign to the sons of Israel. So God said, what was holy is going to remain holy. And if God has made you holy, you will remain holy. This is awesome. This is something that goes unnoticed. When God calls us holy, we are holy because God called us holy. So He goes, I want you to take these holy things and do a new purpose for them. I want you to take them and attach, after you flatten them out, I want you to attach them as siding to the altar the burnt offering, so that it continues a holy purpose, but it has another holy purpose, to remind Israel not to sin like these people did. And sometimes when we depart from the pathway, we should make remembrances of where we got off and where we got back on, so we don't get off again. Signs of remembrance can be very important for us. So Eleazar the priest took the bronze censers which the men who were burned had offered, and they hammered them out as a plating for the altar, as a reminder to the sons of Israel that no layman who is not of the descendant of Aaron should come near to the burnt incense before the Lord, so that he will not become like Korah and his company, just as the Lord had spoken to him through Moses. It's a warning. One of the great things about the Scriptures, it tells us who God is. It tells us His love for us. It tells us that we can have a hope of eternal life through His Son. It tells us how to minister to one another and what God has commanded for us to do and how to act and how to behave and how to minister. But it also provides warnings that there is a devil and he's real. That there's hell and it's a place. And we're not to go there. It warns us against such terrible things. As I've said before, the reason heaven is because it's the dwelling place of God. The reason hell is not the fire and the brimstone, although that's included. It's the absence of God. You see, Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego were put in fire, but they were preserved. Not even the smoke affected them, because God himself protected them. So even when we think we're in hell and we are protected by God, we're not there, because he's with us. So, what do we learn from this? 1, don't mess with God's people. 2, take seriously the ministry God has given you and perform it with all the commitment and passion, regardless of what other people think how important you are. Because God thought you important enough to give you that ministry. Therefore, perform it as unto God. And all God's people said,